Hello, and you're listening to your Majesty's Secret Podcast. I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you'd like to check out more shows, go to foureyedradio.com.
Hey there, Eric here from Socially Awkward Studios, and this Four-Eyed Radio presentation is being proudly brought to you by Raven Designs, illustration and design that fit your personality. For samples and inquiries, visit ravencruise.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my web 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello! The name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley, from Cinema on the Rocks. And with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios. And you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. That's right, you're listening to the show where we discuss bondage, James Bondage, or at least people who have played James Bondage. In this case, we're going to mainly be discussing some of the latter-day works of Sean Connery after he finally gave up on being James Bond for good. But first, we will also be talking about the film that just came out from former Bond Pierce Brosnan, The November Man.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at a few of Connery's flicks post his Bond era, but specifically flicks that we felt still had kind of a Bondinessocity to them. Not necessarily directly in some of the films. There was definitely more present than in some of the others, but we'll talk about that, and we just kind of want to discuss whether or not he was typecast after Bond as being only this type, or if he managed to break free of that and really go out on his own.
Indeed. But first we'll go with current events, and that would be the Pierce Brosnan film November Man, which, if you are listening to this in a timely fashion, just was released this past week. Unfortunately, Eric did not have a chance to see it, but I did. Wow. And I will say that, just the very short version, if you have any interest at all in seeing it, I do recommend it as being worth your time. And unlike all of the other movies we discuss, I will keep this relatively spoiler-free.
Being that it is being released within less than a week from the release date of this podcast, it was released on Wednesday, and this will be dropping the following Monday. So, not even a whole week has passed since the opening of this movie, so we'll keep it as spoiler-free as possible. If you don't want anything at all from this movie, now would be a good time to skip ahead and see if we're talking about Connery yet. But don't worry, we're not going to give anything away that's going to ruin the flick for you.
Indeed. We'll do a Pierce Brosnan-themed episode probably in about a year where we'll be free to spoil this one. Yeah. But for right now, I'll keep it spoiler-free and just give you kind of a heads up of what's going on with it.
Awesome. So you got a chance to see this one. Did you go opening day?
I did. I went opening night, third show that was possibly available to me, so got in there nice and early.
Was it a packed house? Was there a lot of people coming out to see this? I know Wednesday releases are hit or miss on big crowds.
I was actually really surprised at how crowded it was, because I got to a 5 o'clock show. Mm-hmm. So you still have people who haven't finished their workday yet, or just finished their workday, and have a lot of people just don't go right to the movie. They go take care of dinner, kids, whatever first, and then go out. But I went straight to the 5 o'clock show, and I would say the house was about half packed. So it was more packed than I expected for that time of day. And when I left, there were plenty of people showing up for the 7:45. So
okay.
And I made sure to watch it civilized, which means I went to a theater that also has a bar.
Of course.
Because it's the only way to watch movies nowadays.
That is my favorite. I'm glad that more and more of those are popping up. It used to be such a rarity, and now I know of at least 3 different actual chains that do it here in the Valley. And like just near me, there's one right next to my work, as a matter of fact, and then there's another one very close to my work that's even like a nicer version of that. This one's got like full recliners. You go in, it's got like a brand new blanket and little pillow, and I'm like, do you want me to watch a movie or go to sleep? What's going on here? But,
pretty sure that's the chain I went to, except I didn't go for the blanket and pillow.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that might be the same chain. I'm not sure if they're nationwide or if
they do.
Local.
They do have a theater in Scottsdale.
Oh, okay, so yep, that was probably the one. That's actually where I saw Skyfall one of the times I saw it. As a matter of fact, it was a work outing. They took us there, which kind of stunk because here we are going to a movie theater with a bar, but we're all technically at work, so we couldn't drink anything. We got food, but no drinks. I was like,
I will say that the combination of Stella Artois and popcorn is interesting, but hey, why not? The popcorn was free.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's always good. That chain, I think, actually has actual popcorn poppers. There's another chain that has a location really close to my work that the only popcorn they have, if you order popcorn, it's literally a bag of Orville Redenbacher microwave popcorn. I'm like, but what's wrong with you people?
That's not the worst I've seen. I had a friend who, when he was growing up, worked at a movie theater, and the theater that he worked for, they got just gigantic pre-popped, like, imagine 2 lawn and leaf garbage bags put together. That size bag of pre-pop popcorn, they just got several of those in trucks. So, yeah, it was not fresh. It was not good. And the only way that they made it edible and anything but dry, he said, was they just drowned it in artificial butter grease.
Yeah. Which that stuff is so nasty to begin with. I mean, oh my goodness. Could you just pour some vegetable oil all over my popcorn, please? I don't want to actually taste popcorn. I want to taste this. It's so not real butter. That's one thing I do like about watching movies at home. I will fire up the popper. I will actually pop it in a saucepan with a little bit of vegetable oil, the popcorn, some salt. Pop it up that way, and then drizzle real butter over it. Oh my goodness, so good.
I don't think I've had popcorn at home since I was a little kid. If I'm at home and I'm gonna snack during a movie, I tend to be more of a cheese and crackers guy. Or maybe some Doritos, or Chex Mix, or, of course, the all-time go-to, Tombstone Pizza.
There you go.
So
I'm more of a Totino's guy myself, but...
that works, too.
So what was your overall impression of The November Man?
My overall impression was very, very positive. The one bit of general conversation that I tended to hear from people who talked about the movie before it came out was that, oh, Pierce Brosnan is playing a spy, so he's going to be Bond again. And just the general assumption that that's what this was going to be, was going to be a rehash of Bond with, because he's in the CIA, maybe a little bit of Bourne in there. Mm-hmm. And I went in with an open mind, because you never know. Maybe it's going to be that way, maybe it's not, though. I mean, come on, who can't help but make the connection? Because you have Brosnan playing the agent, and then who's the girl? Olga Kurylenko from Quantum of Solace. So you have a double Bond connection there. With that said, that is not what you got. The film is built on a whole lot of spy film and spy novel cliches, I'm not going to lie. But you have to expect that now. I mean, let's be honest. This is a genre that is built on formula. It's just a matter of how they put the formula pieces together to determine how entertaining it's going to be. And this one, the pieces are put together very, very well. You will see the first couple of twists coming. You will not see them all. There are some completely jaw-dropping moments in this movie. I don't care how jaded you are, how many of these you've seen before. There is at least one scene, which is, I consider, far and away the best scene in the movie, that you will go, ah!
Things that make you go,
there is some genuine good stuff in here, and even the stuff you see coming is done well. And as for the Bond comparison, no. And Pierce Brosnan, some people may not realize this, he's executive producer of this film. When you see Irish Dreamtime in front of a film, that's his company. And he lobbied hard to get this film made. This is based on a series of books by a man named Bill Granger. This is from the seventh book in the series. Called There Are No Spies. So this is franchise bait. And it is such franchise bait that actually Irish Dreamtime and Relativity Media are already in pre-pro on the next movie before this one was even released. That's how hard they lobby for this one.
Nice.
And in interviews beforehand, Brosnan said that he's very conscious of his Bond legacy, and he didn't want to do something that was the same, and he thinks that he didn't, and I think he's totally right. He also said that if this looks like any sort of Bond, it's closer to a Daniel Craig. Mm-hmm. And if you're only going for them film Bonds, I can see that. But the closest this gets to any Bond is Ian Fleming's Bond. The cold, nasty bastard who Cubby Broccoli said, yeah, I like the idea of the character, but we got to whitewash him hard before we put him on film. Now, start with Ian Fleming's Bond. Now make it more grim, darker, all right, meaner, deadlier.
Damn.
But also make him more of a decent human being.
Wait, what?
Now, you can do both of these things at the same time. In fact, it's not... I've seen some reviews where they say this seems so improbable, but if you know anybody who lives at a personality extreme, they tend to live at both with nothing in the middle. And that's where this character is. If he's in killer mode, damn, you stay out of his way, and there is some heavy, grim stuff going on. Whereas if you're somebody who he cares about, who he's going to protect, he will be your protector for you. So that's the character type we're looking at here. We're not looking at a straight-up Bond at all. He is very much his own character. These aren't the sharp one-liners. The humor in here is almost nil. That's not to say that there isn't anything fun about it, because it is fun, but it's fun in the way of a relentlessly paced action film.
Right.
So we're not dropping the slick one-liners or, no, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. Nope, nothing like that.
Well, that's awesome. As much as I love the Bond genre and Bond in general, obviously, I don't really want to see movies that are made in that same exact formula outside of the Bond universe, because it seems like a cheap knockoff. So I'm glad that this one isn't that it's actually something unique and its own, while still having ties back to that universe that we know and love. So I'm looking forward to checking this out, and I'll report my own thoughts on it on a future episode after I've seen it.
And just two more points that are worth making, one of which I've kind of alluded to in terms of how it does reach for the grim. It is R-rated, and it earned it. So, as we know, James Bond has never crossed the PG-13 threshold. Yeah, the November Man does, and it crosses it hard. So it earns its R rating. And another really, really cool thing about this movie is it's got the action, it's got some gore. It does not rely on CGI. It relies mostly on practical effects. Oh. So it's got that old school Cold War spy thriller feel, even though it's got a very modern story, modern plot. Because it isn't so CGI heavy, you get a lot more gritty action, and it plays very well.
Nice. Yeah, definitely looking forward to this one. I have to check that out. I might have to check out some of these novels too. I haven't read any of these. I vaguely remember hearing about them or seeing them at some point, but I know I've never read any of them. Have you read any of the novels that these are based on?
I have not, though I think I may consider starting, but haven't started yet.
Yeah. I'll definitely want to see the movie first before I go and read the book, because that's a good way to ruin a movie, is to read the book first. So I'm not going to do that, but I do think I might want to check that out, because it sounds like an interesting series.
Indeed. Now, with that in mind, we're going to move on to the main event of our episode, and that would be Connery, Sean Connery. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about 4 movies that he did after he ceased being the Brett Favre of the James Bond universe. And for those who don't remember that metaphor, it comes from the fact that first he's with the team. He's been the team's guy all along. He's been great and legendary, and finally he says he's had enough, and he walks off the team. And then after he's retired from the role, he's like, you know what? No, I'll go one more time. So he goes one more time and says, nope, I'm done this time. Really retires again. And then after a while, he decides to come back one more time and play for the enemy of the team he started with.
It couldn't be a better metaphor. That is, it's so true. It's exactly what he did.
So after Sean Connery played Brett Favre, he then went on to actually have a very, very respectable film career. And you wonder why I say had, because officially, even though he's done a couple voiceovers since then, he retired in 2003. And that's a coda we'll put on the end of this episode. But the 4 films that we picked out that he did after Never Say Never Again that had the most Bondinessocity were The Hunt for Red October. That's what we're going to start with. And then, well, we'll announce them as we go. How about that?
Yeah, we'll just suffice to say we're covering about a 9 to 10 year stretch of career after Bond, starting with The Hunt for Red October, which came out in 1990.
Yep. And based on yet another series of novels. This was based on the first novel ever from Mr. Tom Clancy, originally written in 1984. A Cold War classic of a novel.
Yes. And
also turned into what I personally consider to be the last great Cold War film.
I could get on board with that. Absolutely. They really tried to steer away from that in most films after that, and the ones that didn't just did it piss poorly. So I would say, yes, this would probably be one of the last good ones that came out.
And actually, you make a good point about, because in 1990, this was after the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union was about to go. So this is when the Cold War is, if in the minds of some people it's over, in reality it's not quite, but it's really, really close and might as well be. So when the script was first sent to Sean Connery by a fax machine, because it's not because it's 1989 at this point.
Just the fax, man.
So when producer Mace Neufeld and director John McTiernan, who this, by the way, I think is part of the highlight of John McTiernan's career, because he did 3-banger right in a row. He did Die Hard, he did Predator, he did this. I mean, this is the height of his powers right here as a director. But
that's a hell of a resume right there.
It is. So Connery gets faxed the script, and he says, well, it's an interesting story, but I don't think I can do this. And they say, why? He says, well, look at this story. It's about the Americans versus the Soviets. We got détente, and this just doesn't make any sense. And then Mace Neufeld, the producer, says, didn't you see the first page? What do you mean? He says, well, the first page says that it's a flashback. And he says, I didn't get that. And it turns out they didn't fax him the first page.
Oops.
Which has an opening text crawl that says, just before Gorbachev came to power, none of what you are about to see ever officially happened.
Yep.
So you're looking at a classified flashback to the year 1984.
Yep. Which I think is a great way to do it when you're only dealing with a few years, but you're dealing with something that's like crap. You know, it's like now the political structure has changed so dramatically just in the last 5 years that this story doesn't make any sense happening now. So how do we fix that? Well, boom, 3 lines of text. This happened 6 years ago. Boom, done. Move on with the storyline. And it was a fantastic movie. This is one of my favorite. It's definitely my favorite Tom Clancy adaptation. All the other films, some of them were fun, but none of them were good like this one was. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's my feeling on the Clancy conversions.
I personally think this is the only good Tom Clancy conversion. I didn't like any of the other ones. I can deal with a couple of them, but I don't like any of them except for this one. And in terms of the novels, I think this is based on one of his 2 best novels. I think his 2 best were this one and The Cardinal of the Kremlin.
I was about to say it better be Cardinal of the Kremlin. That's my favorite of his, novel-wise, is The Cardinal of the Kremlin. And then Hunt for Red October would definitely be 2. I think Clear and Present Danger was a fantastic book as well. I really liked that book. Not a fantastic movie. There was worse, though. Sum of All Fears.
Sum of All Fears was crap.
It was awful. It was bad.
And I'll be honest, that's about when the book started to take a dump for me too. Mm-hmm. Just before Tom Clancy started hiring ghostwriters, because you knew he hired ghostwriters, and the thing is, when he first started doing it, he didn't admit it. Like if you look at one of the first couple books that came out with his name on them that were ghostwritten, the first one was called Tom Clancy's Politica, and that's all the first edition was called. Even though it was written by somebody else, that person's name wasn't on it. And I hate it when authors do that. I think that's a crap move, because basically what that means is that the person whose name is on it, and this will also be usually true, not always, I'm going to make that, but usually, if you see an author if you see a book where there's two names on it, and there's one really famous author and one not so famous, the famous author wrote a 3,000-word outline of it, and the other person wrote the rest. Now, sometimes you'll get 10,000 words out of the famous author, which is then about 10% of the book. And then you have the case of James Patterson, who freely admits that almost everything he's written after he became massively successful, he's written 2,000-word outlines for and has other people write the rest, even though his name's the only one on it.
Yeah.
And
that's the only way you can crank out that many books.
And to me, I don't think that's right. I think that's wrong.
No, the authors who actually write the story should definitely get the credit. However, there's the flip side of it as well. It's like these are people who may not have the necessary name recognition to get a book deal on their own. These might be authors who wouldn't get that paycheck any other way. And, well, I definitely think they should be getting credit for it. I can understand why they would be willing to do it.
Oh, I can see why they're willing to do it, too, just like a lot of Hollywood script doctors. They work for free. Well, they don't work for – let me rephrase that. They work for free of credit and take the paycheck and know their name's never going to be on the movie. And this is true of not-so-famous people, and this is true of famous people. You will never see Carrie Fisher's name on most of the movies she's done a script pass on. You will not see Kevin Smith's name on many of the movies he's done a script pass on. Same with Quentin Tarantino, but they're getting paid. So,
as long as my name's on the check, that's what matters.
Exactly. However, as far as the writing of this script goes, and I love this, I think this is really awesome. The writer of Hunt for Red October, the screenplay, is Larry Ferguson, and he also happens to play the chief of the boat on the Dallas. Same guy.
Oh, wow. I'm like, I know I've heard that name, but it wasn't in the writing credits that I was thinking about it.
He had been an actor, but hadn't acted for 16 years. He'd moved on to writing since then. But when he would talk about his script with John McTiernan, the way he would do it is he memorized all the lines, so he would go back and forth in character describing the scenes. And McTiernan kind of liked how he sounded. And McTiernan made the executive decision to cast him as chief of the boat and didn't tell him until the call sheet started coming out. At which point Ferguson went to an acting coach and said, okay, spruce me up here. And then by his own admission in an interview, whether this is true or not, he also started writing himself into more scenes. And I think that's fine. I loved him in the movie.
He's like, well, if that's how they're going to be, I'm going to either make it mine or make them sorry. One or the other.
Yeah. And so Clancy is also very much in the Ian Fleming mold of not really caring much about women. Though Hunt for Red October famously only has 2 spoken lines by women, and that's not true. There are, in fact, at least 4 female speaking parts. They get maybe 45, 60 seconds worth of dialogue, so it's still completely negligible.
But one of them is Gates McFadden, so Dr. Crusher makes an appearance. I'm happy.
Yep, she is playing Jack Ryan's wife, and then there is a little girl who is supposed to be his daughter, and they have the lion's share of the female dialogue, all of which occurs within the first 5 minutes. The next biggest female speaking part is the airline stewardess, who gets her lines in just shortly right thereafter. And then in the background, if you're really paying attention, when Ryan goes into the naval shipyard, you can hear a female dock worker yelling something unintelligible. So, in the Ian Fleming mold, how important are women? That important.
Yeah.
Though Clancy takes it a step further, and, well, actually, no. In the book, they are still kind of sex objects, but they decided not to go with that angle in this particular story.
And to be fair, in most of the scenes, it makes sense because the majority of this movie happens inside naval submarines, whether it be American naval submarines or Russian naval submarines, neither one of which, especially in this day and age, would have had a woman aboard in any shape or form. So
absolutely.
It's legitimate in that sense. Yes, they could have easily worked more female characters into the scenes that didn't take place on these boats. But then you think about it too. A lot of the scenes that didn't take place on the boat took place in political offices, which in the 80s weren't a whole lot of women there either. So,
and in fact, the crew actually made a point of how unusual it was that the part of James Greer, a major player in the Washington power scene as director of the CIA and a naval admiral, is played by a black man. Of course, that being James Earl Jones. Now, come on, if you can't stand up and salute to James Earl Jones, what the hell is wrong with you?
That's Mufasa, man. You don't mess around.
Screw that, that's Darth Vader.
Yeah, but we see Darth Vader, you don't want to listen to what he's saying because he's the bad guy. Mufasa.
Oh, I still want to listen to what he's saying because I don't want him to force choke my ass.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you pretty much listen to James Earl Jones unless you're Grand Moff Tarkin. That's really the only guy who can get away with not listening to him.
And, of course, James Earl Jones does a fantastic job in the role of Greer. Mm-hmm. And no complaint. In fact, I can't think of anyone who does a bad job in this movie.
No, I agree. It's fantastic acting all around. As I told you when we were watching these, I'm like, it's nice to go back and see when Alec Baldwin was a serious actor.
And this is his breakout role. This is the one that made him a star. So this is Alec Baldwin when he's still relatively unknown. This is the role that got him other roles. This is the role he took while you could still see his neck. And this is before he Shatnered himself.
Yep.
And bear in mind, I actually have no ill will against Alec Baldwin at all. I don't watch television very much, so I really haven't caught a lot of what he's done lately outside of TV commercials. So, but in terms of as an actor, I've never really had that much of a problem with him, and I really do like him here. I think he's a wonderful choice for Jack Ryan. And in interviews, actually, James Earl Jones had nothing but good things to say about him. It's like this kid was just amazing. He would say he memorized all of his lines, including the ones in Russian, overnight, just instantly. And even 12 years later, when the interviews I watched were recorded, Baldwin still remembered all of his lines in Russian.
Yeah, he from what I understand, I've always heard that he's very professional as far as doing his job and everything. It's just that, later on in his career, he just turned into this, I guess he would like to go the comedy route, and he can be really funny. I've seen him several times on Saturday Night Live, things like this, where he's really funny, but you can't take him seriously anymore. It's not like one of these, other types where they start out in comedy and then gradually delve into deeper stuff, and sometimes they pull it off, sometimes they don't. Robin Williams is able to pull off serious when he did it. Jim Carrey, not so much, in my opinion.
No.
Did you watch that number 23? Oh my, no, just don't. If you probably have.
Nope.
I'm sorry. Oh, good. Do not. It's not worth your time. It's not even good enough to make fun of after the fact. It's just bad.
I don't even particularly enjoy Jim Carrey as a comedian, so
I can take him in small doses, and basically he is. That's just it.
He doesn't allow small doses.
Well, I mean, like small doses. Like I'll watch one of his movies, and then I'll be set for a year. I'll watch Liar Liar, and then I don't need to watch any other Jim Carrey stuff for a year, and then I'll watch the first Ace Ventura, and then I'm set for another year. he has his niche, and it is what it is, and he cashed in on it. I can't say anything negative about him for that, but yeah, when he tried to go serious, it was just not a good thing.
Yeah.
But there have been plenty of comedic actors who started out as comedic actors who then did serious roles that were perfectly believable and actually did a fantastic job. So,
like as you mentioned, Bill Murray and Robin Williams, and so yeah, there's plenty who could go from comedy to drama. And in fact, most of the actors whom I've ever spoken to and asked the question of, most of them will say comedy's harder.
I can believe that, because you're trying so hard to make people laugh, and you don't know. There's so much more involved, I think, in the timing and everything like that, as opposed to with the more dramatic roles. I think it's more spelled out for you in the script and the direction and things like that. I think there's more direction there. And again, I'm not an actor or anything, so I mean, I could be talking out of my bum here, but my impression is that there's more direction from outside sources for the dramatic stuff that would make it not necessarily easier, but maybe more guided. Whereas with the comedy, you have to have that natural something to make it work. Otherwise, it just doesn't.
Yeah, with the comedy, the actors I've talked to have said that, one, there is that intrinsic timing that a good director can help you along with, but can't make you fake. And the other thing is you have to make it look natural, and that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Because once you can fake the sincerity, you got it made. But it's much easier, from what I've heard, to act into drama than it is to act comedically and make it seem like something that is not forced. Because let's face it, when you see forced comedy, it generally sucks.
Yep.
This is why Teatro Jonah Hill does nothing for me. But one person who also does very well in this film, of course, is our guest of honor, Mr. Sean Connery.
Sean Connery, yes. Yeah, we almost forgot to mention he was in this flick as well.
No, I figured we'd get the other stuff out of the way first before getting to Sean. Well, actually, one more thing for those who have read the book or who have even seen the book, which if you look at it is a frickin' doorstop of a book, and wonder how you can condense it. This is one of the most marvelous jobs of condensing a massive novel into a workable screenplay that I've ever seen. And because, as Alec Baldwin said in an interview, Tom Clancy can spend 3 pages discovering a government issue number 2 pencil. And so you have just pages and pages and pages of dense stuff. And McTiernan and Ferguson just tear it out, get to the heart of the story. They keep everything important. So they do a really good job of condensing it. And they get to the heart of what they think is the most important part of the story. Kind of bit of a Treasure Island type mode, but there's more to it than that. And the guy who really makes it work, just as much as Alec Baldwin, of course, is Mr. Sean Connery.
Yep. Absolutely. He does a fantastic job in this movie. And as you were saying, with the condensing of such a large novel into just a movie, I do have to say that I think Tom Clancy's style of writing lends itself to this type of condensation, because you've got so many pages of description on things that in a movie you can be like, okay, boom, here it is. Here's a picture of it. Now we're done. So we don't need all that dialogue or any of that text, because we've got the visual on it. And then even when you go into the scenes that are more technical, I remember when I was reading this book, the description of the Caterpillar Drive on this Russian submarine was extensive, to say the least. And they really whittled that down to just enough for the regular person watching the movie to understand what they were talking about. You know, he basically said it's kind of like a jet engine for water. It sucks in here, shoots out here, no moving parts, it's quiet. Boom. Hey, that's all we needed. So we're good to go. So, yeah, I definitely agree. Great job of transitioning from book to screenplay.
And with what Connery does, the Bondinessocity really comes out from the fact that this is a Tom Clancy novel. The Bond equivalent in this story is going to be more Alec Baldwin's character. And that's a very light Bond, because he's a reluctant agent. Yeah. As he says, I'm just an analyst. This is before he starts Mary Sueing it out and becoming president of the United States and all that crap. After Clancy jumped the shark. So Connery isn't the Bond in this movie.
No.
He's the Bond ally in this movie, who could be the antagonist. In fact, if you look at it from the point of view that he starts out as maybe being the antagonist, maybe being an ally, you don't know, and ends up being an ally, he's Octopussy.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. You start out not really knowing what his intentions are. You know, he's got an amazing amount of power at his fingertips. He's got this submarine chock full of nuclear missiles and a top secret, brand new Caterpillar drive that would enable him to basically, just float this thing right up next to the United States and be like, "Hey guys, how's it going? Didn't hear me coming, did you?" That could mean one of two very dangerous things. Either he's coming over and saying, "Hey, I don't want to be over there anymore. I want to be with you guys. Here's my gift to you." Or he's been like, "I'm sick of these darn Americans. I'm going to go blow some up." You really don't know at the beginning. And that's the whole point, is that nobody knows, even as the audience, that we haven't been told yet what's going on. So it's fantastic.
Now, to be fair, you have kind of an inkling, because there's the idea of Sean Connery as a villain just seems kind of out of place. We'll get there.
I was about to say, well, all right.
But just intrinsically, the audience wants to think that he's going to end up being a heroic character, especially at top billing.
Yeah.
And now there have been, of course, many instances where there's been that first shocker. Like, I remember the first movie where Harrison Ford ended up being the bad guy. And I remember the first movie where Alan Alda was the bad guy. Hawkeye was the bad guy. But so it's not like the shocker hasn't happened. But in this movie, of course, let's face it, we're not going to go too far in before we figure out what his intentions really are. And I think it's no spoiler at all, even though we did not promise not to spoil this movie.
Yeah.
To say that Sean Connery and his character intends to defect. And he announces this as he kills a KGB agent named Putin.
That's some foreshadowing right there. No. Either that or it's just a common Russian name. It's a really cool twist, though. But what I like about it is that even as we're let in on the story as the audience, it's still not fully clear to everybody involved yet. Basically, you have Alec Baldwin's character. You have Jack Ryan, who is the only person who firmly 100% believes that it's a defection, and that's what's happening. Everybody else is either of the I don't know, or the no, he's coming here to kill us, what's wrong with you mindset. He's pretty much the only one who's like gung-ho, no, this is what's happening. Trust me, I know this guy because I met him one time in passing. That seems to be his reasoning for a lot of it. There's like, no, I met him.
Well, he's also studied the crap out of the guy.
Yes.
So.
But so basically you have that kind of dynamic where you've got this one major character who's like, no, I know what's going on and none of you do, so let me go and do this thing. And you're right, he's like the reluctant agent. He just wants to submit. He's just like, hey, I think this might be going on. Here you go. Okay, see you guys later. And they're like, oh yeah, well in that case you go out there. Several times throughout the film, he's talking to himself. I should have just sent a memo. Next time, I'm just going to send the memo.
Yep. And, of course, you have Sean Connery, utterly believable as the most respected submarine captain in the Soviet Navy. That's just, you don't even question it. It's just, okay, he's speaking Russian, he's wearing a furry hat, and they're pulling out of a base in the Arctic. Yep, he is a Soviet Navy commander.
Absolutely.
We have no problem believing this at all.
None at all.
It doesn't matter that he doesn't even try to put on a Russian accent, which a lot of people complained about, but I'm good with. I don't care if he's speaking Russian with a Scottish brogue until they switch over to English. Honestly, I think it's better that he didn't try, because I think the Russian accent would have been awful.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, whenever I hear a fake Russian accent in a movie, it's the easiest accent to screw up. In fact, the only native English speaker I can think of who does a perfect Russian accent, and technically she does it because her grandmother was Russian, is Helen Mirren. Her Russian accent is perfect. But other than that, if you start out as a native English speaker, you're probably best off not bothering.
And when you have, Sean Connery, part of his, appeal, part of his name is in that voice. So to have him in there and then to have him, okay, but we're also going to make you change your voice to try to fit into the character better. It would have actually taken me out of the character more to be looking at Sean Connery and hearing some weird wannabe Russian voice coming out of him instead of hearing Sean Connery. So I'm glad that they chose not to do that and that he went basically as himself, just sometimes speaking Russian. That's fine. I'm okay with it. It didn't take me out of the story, and in fact, I think it kept me in the story better than had it been the other way.
Yeah, because it was just at that point, I'm not worrying about you trying to fake me out about him being the character. I'm just watching him be the character, yes. And I'm drawn right into it, and it works just great. And along with Connery's performance, there's wonderful direction from McTiernan. The writing by Ferguson is top-notch. And also, you get a real treat of cinematography from Jan de Bont, who would be known to most people as the director of Twister. But he also happens to be a damn fine cinematographer. And he does a wonderful job of working inside these cramped sets of the submarines. Now, of course, 2 of the 3 main submarines that we see are Hollywood gimbal sets, the Red October and the Dallas. However, when you see the Konovalov, the Soviet fast attack sub, that's inside a real Soviet fast attack sub. And now the one they filmed on was actually a diesel boat, not a nuclear boat like they say the Konovalov is. Mm-hmm. But I have actually been on a Soviet fast attack sub. When I used to live in Vancouver, of course, after the Cold War was over and the Soviets were trying to make some money, well, the Russians were trying to make some money. One thing that they did was they sold off an old fast attack submarine that turned into a tourist attraction that was moored just off of Vancouver. And so I got to go inside. This is one cramped son of a bitch. And I'm 6'1". I can understand why in the real subservice you're not allowed to be above 5'10", yeah. And in some services even shorter. And then the story I remember most, just to get off on a little tangent, it's part of the boat you don't see in the film. Because on the Konovalov, you only actually see the bridge. And it is just as cramped as they make it look. How you got cameras moving around in there is just almost a supernatural feat. It's amazing. But when I went into the engine room, which is really cramped, really tiny, maybe about the size of my living room. And this was not only the engine room, there were crew bunks in there, and they also used it as cafeteria. So the tour guide says, now imagine this. You're in the engine room. It smells like diesel fuel. You've got a bunch of sweaty guys who only shower once every 3 months. And the one thing they're guaranteed to eat every day is borscht. So you got gas, sweat, and borscht farts.
Yummy.
My God, these men must have been superhuman. And I've also been aboard an American World War II sub, and that's even smaller. But so the great cinematography in these cramped quarters is really something worth noting, because it's one thing to shoot a beautiful vista where you've got all kinds of clouds and mountains around you, all the room in the universe. But in a tiny room, that's where the cinematographer shows his art. Yeah. So just had to mention that, because it really is so well done in this flick.
It really is. You don't, again, you're never taken out of the moment. Like, you understand that it's a cramped space, you understand what's going on without it being force-fed to you or having to be discussed in length. And yet it doesn't deter from the actual film. I mean, it's really just a damn good movie, just from start to finish, and one of my favorites. So
yeah, I would say out of the Connery movies we're discussing here, in terms of how well made it is, I think this is critically the best film.
I can agree with that.
In terms of favorites, I think it's tied with another one.
Really? I think for me, this one is definitely my favorite of the 4 we'll be discussing today. It's definitely the best as far as just, pure quality, when you're talking about the screenplay, you're talking about the writing, you're talking about the acting, the direction, everything. I think this one, definitely has everything better than everything else that we're going to be talking about. As far as the pure amount of fun I have while watching it, there might be one on this list that narrowly beats it out. Definitely not a better film, but the fun factor might be just a little bit higher. But that might be the only category in which any of these other films are able to beat this one out. I definitely say this one's my favorite of the four.
See, and that's why I make the distinction of best versus favorite. Critical acclaim doesn't go into favorite. So that's how they can be tied.
All right. So
we've discussed this every list we've ever done. So any other comments on Hunt for Red October?
No, if you haven't seen it, go find it, go watch it. It's a fantastic film. Definitely, if you haven't read any of the Tom Clancy books and you are thinking about picking one up, this is a good one to choose. This one and Cardinal of the Kremlin. So definitely, skip over the later works, jump back to the beginning of the catalog, and you'll be good to go.
Indeed. And again, for Connery enthusiasts, really, really great follow-up for Connery, showing that, yes, he can play a character who can live inside of the universe of spies and espionage and intelligence and not be Bond and not even be the spy or the agent or whatever have you. So There you go. Which then moves us on to our second film, which we dedicate to Mr. Steve O'Mooney of the Four-Eyed Radio Network because of how he opens all of his stand-up comedy acts. Yes, Steve-O is a stand-up comedian. And he opens every one of his acts with the same line. Eric, would you like to say it or should I?
Go for it.
He opens his act with, "Fuck Michael Bay." That's how he starts it off. And if you're talking Sean Connery and Michael Bay, you are talking 1996 and The Rock.
Welcome to The Rock. Yes.
I would call this... I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say this is a fun movie. Is it a good movie? No. But it is fun. It is fun from start to finish. It is cheesy. It is over the top. But it's done so in a way that is still entertaining. You can go back and rewatch this, and it's still fantastic. So,
it is, if I'm going to say that I have such thing as a favorite Michael Bay film, in fact I do, this is it. This is what happens when you give Michael Bay a movie and a budget to play with, but no computers. Well, okay, he may get a couple of computers, but he doesn't get nearly as many. He gets no robots. So this is when he's forced to be restrained. And this is when you have not just Jerry Bruckheimer, but also Don Simpson. Because for those who don't remember, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer used to be a double act for producing. A very wonderful double act. Unfortunately, Don Simpson died during the production of The Rock, so it's dedicated to him, and that was a very big loss for Hollywood. But here you have Michael Bay while he's still restrained. And restrained Michael Bay is normal, great action for anyone else. Yes. In fact, in some ways, I think of Michael Bay like I think of James Cameron. Used to be a good filmmaker, now is not.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Avatar sucks. It's the world's most expensive screensaver.
Thank you so much. I liked it better the first time I saw it when it was called Fern Gully. But honestly...
See, I was more into the Pocahontas version of it, but, No, actually, I like Fern Gully better, too.
Yeah, it's like, how do you go from Terminator 2 to Avatar? And then, but the thing is, it got such great reviews, and so many people spent so much money watching it. It's like, why? This is not good.
I think it was the gimmick of the big screen and the 3D, because the story's not good. The acting's not really that good. Sorry, and I like Zoe Saldana as much as everyone else, but she can't save the movie. Neither can Sigourney Weaver. And Stephen Lang, I just want to punch in the face. And I think a lot of it is there's a disconnect, because anyone who has played MMO video games, starting with Myst, has seen all the crap you saw in Avatar before. But we're not talking about Avatar. We're talking about The Rock.
Yes.
So now this film gets automatic points for me because it is set in my favorite city on Earth, San Francisco, California.
Yes. Obviously, The Rock referring to the island prison of Alcatraz, commonly referred to as The Rock.
Yep, and Alcatraz gets its name, by the way, from the Spanish word for pelican, because it was a pelican roost before it was turned into first a fortress to guard San Francisco Bay and then converted into a prison. I have been to Alcatraz, and this was actually filmed in part on Alcatraz. There are some things, of course, that are not accurate. I don't think there's an Indiana Jones style mine under the thing, for example.
Probably not. I have also actually been to Alcatraz one time. Back in high school, we went on a band tour to San Francisco, and in fact, the Alcatraz little tour thing was one of the things we got to do. So,
and one of the things that you just don't realize is, yeah, it looks like a small island, and it is, but when you're on it, damn, it's big.
Yes.
And it is a hike from the jetty where you land up to the first floor of the prison. I mean, it's several stories up of steep hill. It's a hike.
Yeah, it's a cool place to visit if you're in San Francisco area. It's definitely one of those, yeah, it's tourist and whatever, but go check it out anyway. It's awesome. It's cool.
It is awesome. It's also some really wonderful history. The guides there, it is now owned by the National Park Service. The park rangers who run it are very knowledgeable, very good guides. One thing that does happen in the movie, which is necessary to the plot that is not real, is when the park ranger asks everyone to get into cells and close them in. You can do that. In fact, they will offer to let you do it twice. But they don't make you. And in fact, most people on the tour do not. It is effing creepy.
Yep.
Especially because the last time they offer to let you do it is solitary confinement. And even though they let you go in more than one person to a cell, it is pitch dark nothing.
Yep.
Abso-freaking-lutely nothing. And it is the creepiest 10 seconds on Earth.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's something new since when I went, which was even before this movie came out. It was actually, let's see, when I visited Alcatraz, I was a sophomore in high school, which would have put it at 93, 94. And
I went in 2009.
Okay. When I was there, we were not invited to go into the cells. When we were in the actual cell block area, the doors were closed. And we were invited to look through the bars into the cells. They didn't have them open. They did not allow us to go in them, and they certainly didn't close us into them or even offer to have that option. And
when I went... I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't know if it was because we were part of a school tour. Maybe they, dumbed it down for the kids, I've never been back, unfortunately, as an adult to go through the regular tour, so maybe that's just something that they did special for school groups or something.
When I went, the doors were all closed, but the offer was made to allow us to go into a cell if we wanted to. So it wasn't even like the whole group could have gone in. It was just, here's one cell. If you want to walk in it, look around.
Right.
And the first cell they let you walk in, which was a normal cell, they did not close. Solitary, if you wanted to go in, they closed. Yeah. That's creepy.
Yeah. I can imagine.
But again, not compulsory.
Yeah. And in the movie, of course, because part of the plot requires them to lock everybody in the cells to have the hostages there, they make it part of the tour that everybody gets in the dang cells. But yes. You know what? That didn't even... even as I was watching it, I thought, there'd be at least a few people who'd be like, no thanks, and wouldn't get in. But it didn't really take me out of the moment. I mean, there's so many other moments in this movie that are so off the wall. That one,
Nick Cage.
You're a rocket man. Oh my goodness. So many great moments in this movie that are great in their awfulness, but still just... This is not a movie to be taken seriously, folks. You don't go into this movie thinking that you're going to see some sort of great writing. There's not going to be deep drama or psychological thriller action going on here. This is just plain fun action. You check your brain at the door, you go in, you enjoy the flick. It's definitely a ton of fun. This is the one that I was talking about that I think might be just a little bit more fun than The Hunt for Red October. But as far as a movie goes, critically, you can't really give it too many points for much. It was pretty visually. I'll give it that.
See, this for me, despite its great advantage of being set in my favorite city on Earth, actually goes to second place in terms of favoritism behind two others.
Oh.
Now, that said, I totally agree with you. This is check your brain at the door fun.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who aren't familiar with the plot, in case you've been hiding under a rock...
Oh.
Ching! Yes, for those who've been hiding under a rock, the plot goes like so. You have a special forces general and many of the men under his command, some of whom have been with him since Vietnam, some who've only met him since Desert Storm. Remember, this is 96. Desert Storm was just 5 years before. 5 years before. And they're upset that soldiers who have died in special forces in the line of duty, their families are not properly compensated by the military. The military ends up sending lies to the family because they can't say, oh, your son, husband, brother, whatever, died behind enemy lines doing an illegal action. They don't say that. They end up saying something else. They don't get the full benefits and so on and so forth. And this general and his men have had enough. So they decide that the only thing that they can do is break into a U.S. weapons depository, steal some really nasty chemical weapons. Don't kid yourselves, folks. We have them.
Might not be this exact stuff or in this exact form, but yes, somewhere there are some serious bad juju weapons hiding around somewhere.
Yeah, this is stuff called VX gas, and the way that they describe it in the film, it basically melts you. And they get 15 missiles full of this stuff, each of which is capable of killing approximately 70,000 people.
Yeah, they make a point to show how... they make a very strong point to show how even just a small little bit of this spilled was able to completely melt the dude in a very, very short amount of time. And then they go into
because they originally meant to get 16 missiles, and oops, they dropped one.
Oops, our bad. But we had to know how serious this stuff was. If nobody got eaten by this stuff, then we might be thinking, man, it's not that bad.
Yeah. So then they take these missiles and they hijack Alcatraz Island, which is actually not as ridiculous as it sounds because it is a highly defensible position. Even now, there's only one way to get to it, by boat. That's it. And that's some really treacherous water between that island and San Francisco or Oakland, depending which way you want to go. Why the hell you'd want to go to Oakland? Who knows? It's that thing between San Francisco and Berkeley. But anyway... So it's a very, very defensible position, especially if you suddenly have 15 poison rockets pointed at San Francisco. Why is all the hate on San Francisco? I mean, come on. The Rock, Godzilla, Pacific Rim. Dude.
Because if they pointed the missiles at Oakland, nobody would have cared.
That's true. A View to a Kill. I mean, dude. But anyway, so that's how we start off. And our... two heroes are Stanley Goodspeed, played by Nick Cage as Elvis, because he's always acting like Elvis. And, of course, he also has a pregnant girlfriend who decides to follow him to San Francisco because why? Women and children exist to be threatened. That's why. And he is the chemical weapons expert for the FBI who is going to be able to disarm these weapons if he and a special forces team can get there. However, they also know that since... the general, played by Ed Harris, happens to be a damn smart guy. There's no way they're just going to get an airstrike or be able to get there by boat without getting shot down. So they have to figure out a submarine entrance, which is where they go to the one person who, according to this movie, has ever successfully escaped from the Rock.
But wait, I heard that nobody had ever escaped from Alcatraz.
And in fact, if you ask the park rangers about those three guys... who may have escaped from Alcatraz, and even the Mythbusters still think they might have or might not have. They weren't sure. They thought that they probably didn't, but they couldn't totally rule it out. Yeah. Ask the park rangers, they say nobody did. But, of course, the one person who did escape, Sean Connery. And, in fact, not just Sean Connery. Sean Connery as James Bond, except they happen to call him John Mason. Yeah. And we assume that Mr. Mason Bond got arrested in 1963 after stealing some of J. Edgar Hoover's files and then locked away. And one of the places he was locked away was The Rock, which he escaped from. So now, knowing how to escape, he also knows how to get back in.
Exactly. Which is, you have to have some kind of plot point to bring Sean Connery's character into this. Otherwise he's fairly useless without this. He's a fun character, but that's really his stick, is to get in there. And, he has this way to get in, and he's this smooth, he's old, but he's the smooth spy type. And, Nick Cage's character is always like so looking up to him. It's like, oh, this guy's so amazing, this, that, and the other thing. But it's a fun character for him to play because it is so Bond-like, I think, but without necessarily being exactly Bond. But you could definitely take it that route easily. Yeah.
I think this is the closest to Bond he gets out of the 4 movies we're going to discuss.
Yes.
I think that it's almost the Diamonds Are Forever Bond in terms of you can't really take him seriously, except then you mash a little Timothy Dalton hardness in there because he's also kind of bitter.
Yes.
So you put those two things together, and that's the Bond version you get. And it also turns out, just as another subplot point, because Nick Cage can't be the only one with threatened family in San Francisco, is that our British agent happened to, before he got arrested, sleep with a woman from San Francisco after a Led Zeppelin concert, fathered a daughter who now lives in the city.
Typical. Well, yeah, because you wouldn't want just one of them to be worried about it. And Nicolas Cage's character isn't going to care about the city of San Francisco unless his daughter's there, right? So, yeah, you have to have these external threats just to even spark the main character's actions even further. Whether or not that's necessary, I don't know. It does make for some fun scenes, but yeah.
I will say that even though I think the trope is really, really tired, and I'm really honestly sick of it, the fact that because of Sean Connery's daughter's character, we got a fantastic car chase through the city of San Francisco. Though I wish the cameras would have pulled back more, because on the one hand, you can tell it's San Francisco just from all the hills and such, but you don't get the same flavor that you got from, say, Bullet or even A View to a Kill, because the camera shots are so tight.
Right.
But it's still a fantastic chase. It's a lot of fun. And we end up at one of the most scenic, picturesque locations in San Francisco that you don't actually get to see much in films. That's the Palace of Fine Arts, which is a remnant of the former World's Fair with classical Greco architecture. Just beautiful, beautiful place. It's just, in fact, it's right next to a place called the Presidio, which Connery fans may know about, and also right near the entrance to the Golden Gate Bridge. So great use of location for that scene.
Yes. And like you said, without them introducing Connery's daughter's character, there was really no need for that. So you do get a good scene out of it, even if it may have been less than necessary.
Indeed. And then, of course, we have Connery being all antagonistic against everyone else. We have the really evil FBI man who just hates Connery and just wants to skin him alive. And in a way, that character really bothered me. Because one, he's too stereotyped in his hatred mode. And yet halfway through the film, he says, and he's our only hope, and he's kind of championing Connery. And then he goes right back to hating on him. Yeah. And it's just, it's like, okay, so you exist as a plot device. That's all you are. You're crap.
Yep.
But the rest of the movie, and of course you also have Michael Biehn playing Michael Biehn, because he only ever plays Michael Biehn and nobody else, as the leader of the assault team for as long as he lasts. Spoiler alert.
Now, this movie could have been quite a bit different, I understand. There's a couple of things that went in. You talked earlier about screenwriters or uncredited screenwriters who get to go over films. I understand this one is one of the ones that Quentin Tarantino had a hand in, uncredited, but later found out that, oh yeah, he did. Also, I understand that Arnold Schwarzenegger was almost Mason in this movie.
And at that point, I see it working a lot less.
I can't even fathom. I'm like,
can you imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger and Nick Cage in the same room?
heads would explode just on sight.
That would be a combination of ham unseen since you got Shatner and Montalban together for Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. That would just be ham-tastic.
Yeah, that I was reading that and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine the level of insanity that movie would have gone to at that level. And what's really funny is, of all people, Arnold Schwarzenegger was one who, at the time, I guess the script wasn't fully done, and so he didn't think, he turned down the role. He wasn't just like, he didn't audition for it and not get it or something like that. He was offered the role and turned it down because he didn't think the movie was fully baked.
Baked. They go through Haight-Ashbury quickly.
Like, what? So, hey, thanks, Arnold, for not doing this film, because that would have been scary.
Yeah, I just don't think that if you have the combination of Nick Cage, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Michael Bay together, I don't think good things happen. I think Connery gives the film a bit more gravitas while still allowing for some fun, because then on the full gravitas having no fun whatsoever end, and that's what you need for his character, is Ed Harris as our bad guy.
Yes.
And he is a very good character. He is very good at the character he's playing.
Yes.
And he's backed up by some pretty decent heavyweights. I mean, David Morse is one of his lieutenants, and another one is Tony Todd, Candyman, for those of you who can't remember what that name is, or perhaps you remember him as a Klingon. But so there's some real power to this movie. But I think that the reason it's held together so well is Sean Connery.
I can definitely agree with that. It's without Connery, this is just pure cheese all the way through, and not in a good way. You know, when you get just Nicolas Cage and that side of things, you don't get the fun factor of him playing. You know, you get Nicolas Cage, but if he's not playing against somebody else, it's too much. But with Connery's character in there, it's just the right amount of seriousness mixed with cheek to really, I think, sell it. And that's what makes this movie so fun. Again, we're not claiming that this movie is good by any measurable standpoint, but it's fun. I would have to say this is probably my second favorite Michael Bay movie, because the first Bad Boys was just so awesome. That movie I really do like, even from just a critical standpoint as well as a favorite standpoint. But this would definitely be number 2 on my Michael Bay list.
What you gonna do?
I know.
What you gonna do when they come for you?
Bad Boys.
Ain't nobody gonna give you no break. Police won't give you no break.
They sure don't. I don't know those words. That's all the part where they sing funny in a weird voice and real fast, and I don't know any of those words. I just know the bad boys, what you gonna do? That's a fantastic opening scene in that first Bad Boys movie. Love that. Just sets the tone for their relationship in the entire movie, and I loved it. Loved it. But that's not what
I will admit that Bad Boys and Bad Boys 2 are 2 of the only 3 times I could ever stand seeing Martin Lawrence in anything. The other one is Wild Hogs. John Travolta, William H. Macy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Biker comedy, it's actually more hilarious than it has any right to be. I don't normally go for that kind of comedy flick, but it could just be that I have relatives who are bikers, so I get it. But yeah, it's funny. So if you're looking for something funny, check that one out too. Has nothing to do with Michael Bay.
No. All right, that's good news. But for The Rock, again, fun movie. Definitely recommend, if you've never seen it, go check it out at least once. You know, don't go into it expecting highbrow. That's not what you get out of this. But it's a fun movie. It's fun to watch. It's enjoyable. It's your typical popcorn action flick. You get the action. You get just enough cheesy humor to chuckle along with as it goes along, and just barely enough story to tie everything together. So it works.
Yeah, I do enjoy this movie as a fun popcorn flick. Critically, it's got some gaps, but in terms of just pure enjoyability, it's fun. Michael Bay is kept in check by the fact that he doesn't have computer-generated robots. and Sean Connery playing a riff on James Bond, who knows what happened to Kennedy, which is interesting because he would have to have known before Kennedy was shot because he was arrested in 1963.
Yeah.
Just saying. But so I think Connery has fun with that aspect of the character. I think he's conscious of it. I think there's no way he isn't conscious of it. And I think he's enjoying it. And you can tell that he's having some fun here. And it works very, very well. So if you're looking for just some popcorn entertainment from Connery, you could do a lot worse than The Rock.
I agree. It's a fun flick. Just go check it out. But don't be expecting too much out of it. But it is a fun film.
And I kind of suspect that if we gave him a few drinks, maybe even Steve-O would agree. He'll have to tell us.
I'll definitely make sure to get his input and find out what he thinks about The Rock.
Now, moving on, to introduce our next film, I'm going to reminisce a little bit. Once upon a time, I had a dream where all the boys and girls... Well, I really do also have that dream. I really wish that all the boys and girls of the world could just get together and peacefully have fun, because honestly, even though I like violent action movies, I'm a pacifist. But I had another dream once upon a time, thinking, you know what? If I could have any Bond villain in the world, somebody to show up and be the James Bond bad guy. Of course, nowadays you all know that the correct answer to that question for me is Milla Jovovich. However, before that, before I even knew who Milla Jovovich was, I had a dream that Sean Connery should come back, not as James Bond anymore, because Never Say Never Again kind of put the kibosh on that, but to come back as the villain. Maybe even a Blofeld, because at first I wasn't aware of the lawsuits in that back at that point, but even when I was, it's like, okay, even if not as Blofeld, just Sean Connery come back as the James Bond bad guy. Well, of course we know that wasn't really going to happen in the world of Eon Productions and so on, but in 1998, we got what, for a few bright shining moments, I thought was the next best thing, because another very famous British spy franchise finally got its own silver screen debut. That was The Avengers. And The Avengers had for their main villain Mr. August de Winter, played by Sean Connery, heading a Spectre-like organization called Brawley. Surely this would be awesome!
I'm sorry.
Guess what, folks? This is one of the single worst big-budget Hollywood movies ever made.
It really
I put this
bad.
in a special category of hell that sets it alongside such classics as Battlefield Earth, which cost less than this movie, as the remake of Rollerball.
Oh, hey, no. I'm just kidding. That was pretty bad, too.
As Avatar's in a class of its own. But just in terms of movies everyone can agree on, of course, the grand champion, Batman and Robin. Just films that have the moxie to take tens of millions of dollars and flush them square down the toilet while somebody's still urinating on them.
It really is just bad. And like right from the very beginning, you get a good Bond-like opening sequence. You got some strong Bondinessocity right at the beginning. You get this title sequence with the effects and the music, and you really get this sort of Bond feeling. It makes you think, hey, this might be some fun. This might be something entertaining. And then the movie starts, and things go downhill in a tremendous way, so very, very quickly. And even in moments where you think, okay, maybe they're going to come back now, nope, it's further downhill. This movie is bad, folks. This movie is really, really bad.
This movie sucks like an atomic vacuum cleaner. There is just no getting around the fact that this is a terrible resume stain of a movie. And worse yet, Sean Connery gives the single worst performance of his career that I have ever encountered. And I think I've seen every one of his movies. I mean, There are people who will say, well, what about when he was wearing the diaper in Zardoz? No. The diaper in Zardoz was fine. This sucks. This is, ugh. And it didn't have to be that way, because The Avengers is a very solid footing to start from. To give you some chronology here, you have Ian Fleming writing the James Bond books starting in 1952. In 1961, the TV series The Avengers comes out, which is based on British spies working for an agency called the Ministry. And the hero is Mr. John Steed, who was originally played by Patrick Macnee, and who would play that role throughout the series, which had a very good run throughout the decade of the 60s. And in fact, he has a cameo in this film, and Bond fans will also remember him as Sir Godfrey Tibbett from A View to a Kill. He played John Steed originally, and the first companion that he had in the TV series was Mrs. Kathy Gale, played by Honor Blackman. And, of course, Honor Blackman was aggressively poached by Cubby Broccoli to leave the Avengers series so that she could come on to Goldfinger and play... Eric, come on.
Oh, I didn't realize you were looking for me to fill in there.
Come on, I know you love saying it.
Pussy Galore?
Indeed. Pussy Galore came from the Avengers. And then, of course, Pussy Galore, of course, ended Honor Blackman's career with the Avengers, so she had to be replaced. And she was replaced by another fine actress playing Mrs. Emma Peel, Diana Rigg, who would then be poached by the James Bond series to play the only Mrs. Bond, Tracy DiVincenzo Bond, in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
The only quality piece of acting in that movie, I say.
So there is a very strong past Bond connection to the Avengers TV series, and it was a pretty good show. I mean, it was fun. And then, of course, the Bond movies came shortly after the Avengers series started on TV, so there's a leapfrogging effect, and now we have to wait till 1998 to get Avengers as a movie. So it has a solid foundation to build from. And it's not like it didn't have a cast to start with, I would say, in most areas. I am going to go against the grain on one. Like, Ralph Fiennes, I thought was a great choice for John Steed. I think he could have done a fabulous job. Another Bond connection, of course. We now know him as the new M.
Yep.
And, of course, we have Sean Connery as our villain. My dream of ages past. And then we have Jim Broadbent as Mother, the M-like character.
Mm-hmm.
The part that I'm going to disagree with most of the world on is Uma Thurman as Emma Peel. I'm sorry, I can't stand her in this movie.
I'm going to go against the grain as well, because I don't really dig Uma Thurman that much in most of anything. I mean, I don't mind looking at her, but honestly, I think I don't know. I can't think of any movies off the top of my head that I really, really enjoyed that featured her. And every time I have seen her, go ahead.
I can think of one. It's technically two. I liked her in Kill Bill.
I didn't like those films. I didn't find them, like I didn't hate them. It wasn't like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. I wasn't that entertained. It was just kind of like, it is what it is, and I moved on. So I can't really agree with that. But I understand that other people liked it, and she was. I recognize that she was good in that role, but it wasn't for me.
Yeah, I'm a longtime fan of classic Chopsaki, so I got a lot of what it was pulling from.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoyed that aspect, and I thought Thurber was really good in that. But in this, in fact, the thing that really bothered me most is she's playing Poison Ivy again. Almost the exact same crappy ass accent. The same
God. I had forgotten about that.
Attitude.
Oh my gosh, no.
I mean, she's playing almost the same character, except dialed down just enough to pretend to be stiff and British. Man, I get so effing sick of the stiff and British in this movie. I mean, you can do stiff and British right. You can. Some gentlemen named Cleese and Jones and, the Monty Python troupe.
Yep.
They do stiff and British, and they make it damn funny. This, it may be stiff, but it's also limp. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's just not funny.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single joke I laughed at.
It was
and they tried.
Just bad. Yeah, every time there was lots of cringeworthy jokes, which sometimes can be funny when it's just one. When there's one cringeworthy joke in the midst of others. Like going back to the previous movie we talked about, when Nick Cage fires the guy across the bay in the rocket and starts singing the Rocket Man. That was cheesy as all get out, and it was a cringeworthy joke, but in the moment it worked.
In the moment, it was funny.
There are so many moments in the Avengers where they try to go for that cheese factor, and it's just, it doesn't work. It comes off as simply cheesy and not in a good way in any way, shape, or form. And then they keep going with it. It's just one after another. It's like 4, 5, 6 cheesy jokes in a row, and it's like, okay, we get it. You guys aren't funny. Move on. Tell me a story at least, because you're not doing the job making me laugh. How about you tell me a story? They fail there too. It's just bad.
Yeah, let's control the weather, and the way that this is presented is there's already retail weather outlets that you can go to and buy your local weather, so that, say you have a rose garden, you can get the ideal weather conditions for growing roses. Sure. Buy that at any store.
Yeah.
And of course, Connery and his organization Brawley, named after, of course, the British slang for an umbrella, want to control the weather of Great Britain and hold it hostage. And in fact, they start with Britain, but they threaten to do the same thing for the world unless every country on Earth pays him 10% of their gross national product. And it's dumb. You thought that taking a giant Death Star space laser and shooting up a minefield just so you could take over Korea was dumb. But no. You may have even thought that blackmailing the world by killing off chickens, because we must destroy chickens, in on Her Majesty's Secret Service, was dumb. You knew I had to get the chickens in there somewhere. Come on, dude.
Because we love the chickens.
We do love chickens. But no, this is beyond stupid. We can tell you what the plot is, and we can't make it sound dumb enough. I can't think of anything good to say about this movie except that it ended. And picture this, folks. You have a gathering of Spectre, minus, of course, the White Cat, because the White Cat would have been cool.
But the White Cat's fur would have gotten all over their very colorful teddy bear outfits.
Yes. All of the evil agents, except, of course, in fact, including Sean Connery, minus the head in one of the meetings, are wearing colorful, giant teddy bear outfits.
They're a bunch of furries. I just can't even right now. I'm like, seriously, I was watching it, and I had forgotten about that part of it, because I had seen this movie previously and, kind of blocked it from my memory, and then I watched it again to do this episode. And when it came up to that scene, it was still just so jarring that I'm like, are they really all sitting around? Like, I get the idea is that he knows who all of them are, and they know who he is, but they don't know each other. That could have been handled by just simple masks or, a number of other options, but nope, they went with full teddy bear furry outfits. And I can't. It's ridiculous.
The stupidity is frightening. And then they also have, and this is a problem that went with, the script got chopped to hell. I mean, there was never a good cut of this movie. The movie used to be a lot longer, and it got cut down. And what they excised was even more of a plot that's already inane in the short version, where you have two Emma Peels. We have good Emma Peel and bad Emma Peel. Bad Emma Peel is a clone. But in the longer version that didn't end up getting into theaters, she was supposed to wonder if she was schizophrenic, which is just all kinds of mental health issues wrong in terms of people that deal with the real thing. Hollywood never does it right. But anyway, and it was supposed to reveal just some inanity I won't even get into, even though I know what it was. But even in the short version, you have the two Emma Peels, and even after everybody, including John Steed, is aware that there are two different ones, they pretend like, nope, it could be the same person, and she could actually be a bad person. Did that annoy you as much as it annoyed me?
Yes, quite.
And what annoyed you more, that or her belt buckle?
I think it was that. The belt buckle, while annoying, was not nearly as like, really? They already know there's two of them. Why are they still doubting her? Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is a movie that will make you whine because it's so bad and you just want to scream at the characters on the screen. You just, everything about this movie is bad. It's just so bad.
And if you're wondering why I harped about a belt buckle, why such something so trivial should bother me, the movie is so bad that after a while, you don't want to pay attention to the characters. I get migraines, and I didn't want to get one from this movie, and it's that bad. I mean, I went through a lot of whiskey watching this movie, straight whiskey watching this movie, and her belt buckle is about the size of her stomach. I mean, you could surf on this thing, and it's part of a belt that is absolutely impractical, attached to nothing. It's just there, and it's just another thing to get annoyed at from this annoying movie. And yet, out of all the bad crap in the Avengers, the worst thing isn't the belt buckle. The worst thing isn't the really, really bad fall flat on its ass humor. The stupid attempts at stiff Britishness. Even the bad acting of Uma Thurman. No, the single worst thing about the Avengers is Joss Whedon. No, just kidding. That was the other Avengers.
Oh, snap.
The single worst thing about the Avengers is the bad acting of Sean Connery.
It is just, you could tell it was almost as if it was written across his forehead. Check cleared. I'm here. He was phoning it in from the very beginning.
I think it's worse than phoning it in. I think he actively hates himself for being here.
He's like, I really should have invested better. I shouldn't need this paycheck. I was James frickin' Bond.
I've seen him in a movie that he actively hated making, which is not on our list, but I'm going to talk about anyway later, where he didn't phone it in. He still did a credible job. Here, he just actively sucks. And knowing how talented he is, I just can't imagine it being an accident.
Maybe he just recognized how bad everyone else is, and he's like, well, I don't want to show them up. I might as well come down to their level.
It's just... He looks annoyed every time he's on screen, and of course his character is crappily written. You'd think, okay, Sean Connery as a James Bond-style villain, no-brainer, my cat could write this part. I wish my cat had written this part. It would have been more interesting. It would have played better, and probably wouldn't have been so misogynistic either. I mean, do we have to have Sean Connery going for the attempted rape on roofies? Really? Do we? Huh? And we've seen him do the kind of date rape thing as James Bond before, but... Come on, Old Man Connery in 1998, where both the times have changed and he should really know better. Dude.
Yeah, that was tough. That was like, oh, come on, no. But again, he's the villain, so you have to be like, well, okay, so this is just how bad he is. We need to know how bad he is. And I don't like it when movies feel the need to use that as a particular tool to try and tell us how bad a villain is. Because it's like, if they get to that point, that means they haven't done their job in showing us how bad a person is supposed to be. Unless that's a major plot point, I don't need to see that.
And frankly, this character had shown how bad he was already in multiple ways.
Yes.
Fortunately, he gets interrupted when the doorbell rings, and the little old lady comes and bothers him and threatens to shoot him. She's actually probably the best character in the film. But Connery himself, like the first time we really have a conversation with him, he looks angry to be there. And it's not even like he's phoning it in. It's like he's hissing his lines. And he's just like, screw this, I want out of here. And when he says the line, now is the winter of your discontent. One, it's delivered badly, and yet it's delivered with such gusto that he's probably talking about himself. It's just, I was actively horrified watching him here because he's so much better than this. And to see him reduced to something this awful. And again, if you thought the diaper in Zardoz was the lowest he could get, because his acting in that movie is actually fine. A little over the top, but the movie's weird. We'll talk about it at some point, I'm sure. But if you thought something could be more embarrassing than that diaper, it's his acting in The Avengers.
It really was just awful. And, it could have been a bright point if he'd have really stuck to it and, done what we know he's capable of doing. It wouldn't have made this movie good. There's no one actor could have done that. This movie was an abomination from start to finish. It was just a train wreck. But it could have been, that bright spot to look for and be like, yeah, it really stunk, but man, Connery really did a great job. Nope. You can't even say that. You have to look at it and say, man, this movie is really bad. And to make it even worse, Connery sucked in it. So it's just bad. Unless you really have a morbid curiosity to just see how bad it is, if you haven't subjected yourself to this movie already, I would say don't bother. It's not even in the category of so bad it's good. We're not talking about Sharknado 2 here. We're not talking about The Room. This is just bad with no redeeming qualities.
And for me personally, it's even worse than bad because it took a dream I had as a Bond fan and killed it, dug it up, took a dump on the corpse, back in the grave, peed on it, killed it again.
Just in case. Just in case it wasn't dead.
Yes.
I mean, I see you still thinking about it. No, don't.
Because now there's no chance. You'll never see it again. You'll never see Connery even approach this kind of role again. It's just, even if he hadn't retired from acting, it was never going to happen again. And it's just, it utterly wrecked it. And this is a series of movies that act, I mean, yes, I understand they're just movies, but I think you, as people who listen to the show regularly, and I know a lot of you are regulars and not just every so often, these mean something to us. And it was just sad for me to see this because it's something I had really wanted, was Connery as a Bond villain. And this is the closest we were going to get. And I mean, at least Walken as a Bond villain, I could still kind of enjoy, even though he wasn't allowed to do a good job. But this, no, this is bad. This is resume stain. Why did they even release this movie? It sucks that bad.
Yeah. It was, it's just awful. And as you pointed out, it wasn't even cheap to make. It was very expensive to make. As a matter of fact, here it was in the $60 million range, which in
but almost 70.
Huge. Yeah.
And that's before marketing. Because, of course, in the real world, marketing is part of the budget. In Hollywood, it's not.
Exactly. I'm trying to think of anything redeeming in it. I guess if you're a huge Uma Thurman fan, there's two of her in the movie, so she gets quite a bit of screen time. But, I mean, you'd really have to be a huge Thurman fan to want to subject yourself to this.
The two good things I can think of about this movie, and bear in mind, these are the default two things that are good about any horrible movie, so it's nothing special to this, are that one, it ended, and two, thousands of completely blameless behind-the-scenes professionals got paid. I don't blame the guy who painted the set. I'm glad he got some money.
There you go.
I don't blame the craft service crew. I'm glad they got paid. But man, this movie sucks. I give it a squat.
Yes, it just bad, and not even, like I said, there are movies that are so bad that they come around to being at least good to make fun of, But this isn't even that. It's just so bad that it just hurts to watch. It doesn't have that redeeming quality of being able to make fun of it. I wouldn't even think, this isn't even one I'd want to sit down and like do a riff tracks type of thing over, because that would make me have to watch it again.
Yeah, I can only think of a very few small sets of circumstances where I would want to subject myself to this again. And Eric, you're not that cute. Sorry.
So, anything else on The Avengers 1998 before we move on to the last movie on our list?
No, I think we've stood over the grave long enough.
Just so everybody knows who's listening, we did not like this film. In case that was unclear. In case that was unclear to anybody out there.
Now the question is, Avengers, Die Another Day. Oh. I know my answer, and it pains me to say it.
I'm Die Another Day.
Me too.
Yeah.
And that's just wrong.
That shouldn't be a thing.
At least Die Another Day has Rosamund Pike.
It does, and it has some fun scenes. I mean, we've discussed it in detail. If you go back to that episode, you can hear our specific thoughts on Die Another Day and on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which we lumped together. But yeah, not the best Bond film by far, but worlds better than The Avengers.
Yes, sad though that may be. And, you know, I think I might even be willing to watch Batman and Robin again before this.
Ooh, that's tough.
That
one's tough for me because as big a fan of you know, that one's kind of like with you wanted to see that Connery as a bad guy in a Bond type scenario. For me, I've always been a huge Batman fan. The Batman film from 1989 is still one of my favorite movies in general.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I still think of it as one of the best Batmans. I take that back. I think of it as my favorite of the Batman flicks. Even though the new ones are fantastic and very well done, and I love them, that 89 flick was just awesome. And for me, that will always be my favorite Batman film. Well, until they put out something else that takes the cake. And I don't know that Batfleck versus Superman is going to do it for me. But you know, hey, I could be proven wrong.
I will be shocked if you're proven wrong. Just saying.
I would be very shocked as well.
But fortunately, after dashing my dreams all across the pavement and doing nasty things to the remains, Sean Connery came back with something redeeming a year later.
Just 1 year later, yes.
Yes. We're going to party like it's 1999, and we're going to talk about the film that makes... 1999 was, to me, I have a few signature years that really stick out for me for seeing movies. 1989 is one of them. You got Batman, License to Kill, Lethal Weapon 2,
Ooh.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, The Abyss. I mean, that's a fun summer, 1989. 1986, lots of great movies in 1986. 1991, lots of great movies in 91. 99 was its own kind of special. Because on the one hand, you had the hype that was Star Wars Episode 1. Now, whether you like it or not, we're not going there. Just the fact that if you were around at the time, let's face it, you were looking forward to it.
Oh, yeah.
I honestly will call that the most anticipated movie of all time. I don't think I'm wrong there. No. And the term blockbuster is bandied about a lot, and it's just crap. I mean, people call movies blockbusters before they even have gotten 2 trailers out.
Yeah.
Because the term blockbuster was originally coined to mean a movie where the lines to the box office to the theater went around the block. I have seen one movie that was a true blockbuster. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The line was 6 lines wide and went for 3 blocks.
Yep.
I am not kidding.
Yeah. I was actually working at a movie theater when that one came out. So I was very lucky to not only see it opening day, but actually the night before, because I built the print and had to test it. So, you know, it was very important that I watch it. And it was, after all that build up, I'm still so disappointed in that in those prequels, to be honest with you. But yeah, the excitement surrounding that movie coming out was just insane.
And then along with that, in 1999, you have the surprises that came out of nowhere. The Matrix, which I don't think anyone expected to be a definitive generational movie, which it is. No matter what you think of the sequels, which suck, by the way.
What sequels? I don't acknowledge anything after the first Matrix, so I don't know what you're talking about.
The Matrix itself is fantastic.
Yes.
And then whatever you think about anything he's made since then,
I know
the bursting on the scene of M. Night Shyamalan with The Sixth Sense, that was just a major surprise in that year. And then you also had the massive obsession with the millennium, specifically the end of the world. So you had lots of devil movies out there and lots of supernatural movies out there.
Yeah.
You had crap like End of Days with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, gosh.
Though it does have a really fantastic line. One fantastic line of dialogue from that is, "It's amazing what you'll agree to when you're on fire."
True.
That's a great line. I love that line. And it's delivered by Kevin Pollak.
I like him.
So that line's good. And then on the opposite extreme, you have one of my I would consider my favorite devil movie of all time, Roman Polanski's The Ninth Gate, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I just think I enjoy it a lot. It's a fun caper type movie, but it's still got really nice supernatural tones to it. Well acted by Johnny Depp, Emmanuel Signé, Frank Langella. Very good movie. Just extraordinarily loosely based on a book by Arturo Perez Reverte, which does not play the same way at all. However, if you don't mind Dubrow-style fiction, which if you read Ian Fleming, of course you don't, because same thing, I do recommend Arturo Perez Reverte. But along with all of that, in 1999, that other thing that was going on that year that people obsessed over, that only a few people tried to incorporate into a movie, the one we're going to talk about, I think, is the only one that did it successfully. That movie is Entrapment, and it dealt with the Y2K bug.
Yes. This was a really big deal in my world because I had just started, earlier in 1999. Basically, I worked for about 3 months in 1999 as a tech support at a hospital. I was I was considered a computer operator at the time. My job was literally to come in at 9 o'clock at night and sit there until 11:30 at night. Walk out into the server room, change out all the backup tapes. Yes, tapes. And
they still use backup tapes, man.
That's crazy. But yeah, I had to go change out all the backup tapes for the midnight backups to run. And of course, coming up on the 2000 switch, it was a big deal. Nobody was freaking out about it. It was just a matter of, okay, we think we've prepared everything. Now let's sit back and watch. It was the one time I ever saw my boss in the office at the same time as me because they were there at midnight that night. So yeah, this was something that I expected to see more of in film, and nobody else really tried to take advantage of it too much. This movie did it in a good way without making it, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world for reals. It's just like, oh, there's a bug here, and we can take advantage of this to steal some money.
And the thing is, a lot of people look back on the Y2K bug as one of the biggest non-events ever. But the fact is, the reason it was a non-event is that so many professionals kept it from being an event. If no one had done anything, the world would have been screwed. Because for those who now don't know what the Y2K bug is, scary, but there are some who don't. A lot of computer software was written so that when the date was included as part of a program, the year was only written as 2 digits. And the 19 in front of those digits was assumed. So if you had a date that ended in 99, it was assumed to be 1999.
Right.
But because of the way that these programs were written, having only 2 digits for the date, for the year, when the year turned to 2000, the computers would then assume it had turned to 1900. And computer logic does not like going back in time 100 years. And the programs would have just freaked out. And so that's the Y2K bug. So you had a lot of people trying to figure out ways to solve it. And so people had to rewrite software, put in patches so that the date was suddenly recognized as a 4-digit number for the year, and so on and so forth. And what a lot of other places also did on top of this, just to make sure nothing jacked up, was just before midnight at their local time, or whatever time that their computers were set to run off of, GMT or whatever, they turned the computer off. And they left it off until after the turn of midnight before turning it back on, so that the software didn't have to deal with the sudden change of dropping 100 years just in case.
Right.
And that is what eventually we find is at the center of Entrapment, because a very large international clearinghouse bank is turning off its computer for 30 seconds at the stroke of midnight at Y2K, which then gives a small window for some thieves to break in and steal $8 billion.
Yes.
Not a bad use of the Y2K bug.
Not at all. And what was great about it was that it was a good use of the Y2K bug. It was realistic enough to it wasn't some super thing that was going to kill the entire planet because it went off. It was just, hey, they're going to be doing something they never do. They're going to be shutting this particular system down, which would normally prevent anybody from getting in there. Well, they're going to be shutting that down. So we're going to take advantage of that. But what was great is that wasn't even the main focal point of the film. That was just the focal point of their particular plot.
It's what they got to, but it's not how they started.
Exactly. And the rest of the movie, it's really just a fun film. And there are enough twists and turns. I wouldn't say anything completely unexpected. I certainly wasn't shocked by the ending. It was a nice little twist, but it wasn't something I didn't see coming a little bit. How about you? The first time you saw it, were you shocked by the ending? Was it a serious twist for you, or was it just more of a, that's where I thought they might go with this?
I wasn't shocked. It was I thought that was kind of where it was going to go. Mm-hmm. I questioned the internal logic, and in fact, even on watching it again, I think this last time I watched it was the 5th or 6th time I've seen the movie. Mm-hmm. The internal logic still has some bumps to it. I can make it into a straight line, but I have to try. So it's part of its Bondinessocity is how preposterous it is, but it's preposterous in a way you're willing to take. And before we get away from it, just one more thing to add with the whole Y2K bug thing. That wasn't even the original plot of the script. Originally, it was based on the handover of Hong Kong to China. It was changed to be contemporary with the year 1999. So, interesting fun fact there.
There you go.
But in terms of the twists, even though the logic isn't necessarily there unless you force it, it's still predictable illogic. But that's okay. Because, again, that's part of the Bondinessocity of this film. Because, let's face it, that's also most Bond plots. Oh, yeah, we're going to cause an earthquake and destroy all the microchip production in California so we can take over the world. I mean, you have to stretch logic there. We're going to take over Fort Knox so we can nuke it. Stretch some logic there. But that's okay. We're good with this. And part of why we're good with this, just as it was in the Bond films of his era, is because of Sean Connery. Because some of his dialogue is so ridiculous that if anyone other than Connery or maybe James Earl Jones was saying it, you aren't buying. But because it's Connery, he's got that gravitas, not only as a serious actor, but as someone who has been in this kind of universe so many times that you're going to buy what he sells.
Exactly. And they play it off so well. I mean, if you didn't know that this movie was made only a year after the abomination of the Avengers, you'd think it's insane how different the acting level is from Connery between these two films. It's just absolutely insane, the difference. Yeah, and you can also tell this is a movie he wanted to make. In fact, he's a producer on the film, so he really wanted to help make it. In fact, some of his other producers said that he helped keep the budget down because he was quote unquote thrifty. Yeah, I understand. He drove his own car instead of hiring a driver, and basically he wanted to make sure all the money that was spent on the movie showed on the film. So anything, and it does have to be exactly. It's a very, very good looking film. I mean, yes, there are several points where you can tell we're still in the 90s era of special effects, but never anything that comes out too glaringly bad. The main thing you're going to notice it on is if you're watching it in high definition. Mm-hmm. And even then, it doesn't pull you out of the moment any more than any other 90s movie is going to. Right. And you have Connery surrounded by a fine cast. You have Catherine Zeta-Jones basically at the peak of Catherine Zeta-Jones mania. He is fine. That is for sure. You used the right terminology there. I'm wondering what you could possibly think of when you say that. Could it be the scenes that everybody remembers of Catherine Zeta-Jones in tight clothing, having to do some very slinky maneuvers while she's either practicing to or, in fact, slinking and
sliding and dancing her way through laser beams.
Specifically,
could that be it?
The one moment of that whole, like, yeah, it's all good, but the one moment where she's doing the like weird yoga downward dog type thing, going underneath some of the.
So you're a butt guy. Okay.
I'll take the front. I'll take the back. I'll take the side. Everything about Catherine Zeta-Jones is fantastic in this particular film. She is, like you said, it's at the height of her. Basically, just at the height of her. There's so much good stuff going on in this film. Yeah.
To be fair, the main thing I actually like about her is her acting.
Well, that's the thing, is she's good enough that it doesn't distract. Like, there's so many actresses that unfortunately you're like, yeah, they're nice to look at, but oh gosh, if only they didn't have to talk in their movies. She's not like that. She's actually a strong actress as well as being gorgeous, so it plays really well into this character. She's very very believable. It doesn't come off as just cheap eye candy. Yeah, she's eye candy as well, but not just that.
And she also, for the most part, and I'll get into the other part of this in just a moment, she also has very good chemistry with Sean Connery in terms of how they act together.
For the most part, yes.
And for most of the movie, where their relationship is master-protege and almost father-daughter after it picks up after a while, that works really well. And as far as Connery himself, imagine a mixture of James Bond and the Pink Panther. That's what he is. He's a master thief. And so he's got the Bondinessocity and Pink Panther-ish going, except with no Inspector Clouseau. You've got some questionable authority, but no one quite as dumb as Inspector Clouseau. But the only thing, in fact, that rings wrong for me in this entire film, any of the preposterousness I can take until you get to the sexualization of the relationship between Catherine Zeta-Jones's character and Sean Connery's. Not buying it. That's where the chemistry suddenly comes full stop.
Completely unnecessary, and it was just poorly executed. It was just not good, and it did take you out of the moment. Like, the rest of the movie is good, the rest of the relationship is good, the chemistry is fine. It did not need to be a sexual relationship. And I think they forced that to kind of fit into the mold of, oh, well, these movies, here's what you do. They get together, they're doing their thing, and then now they're doing it. Totally unnecessary. Did not have to have that part of the relationship involved.
Yeah, and it just felt so wrong, especially as this happens after we get to the point where it feels like they're in a father-daughter type relationship, so then it gets creepy as hell. I mean, even though they're not biological father-daughter, that's never indicated, but just the way they treat each other, the style of master-protege that they have, and then to go to this. And also the idea of the character of Jin forcing the issue also seems out of character with the rest, where it just doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't. And from what I understand, that particular scene was even voted to be one of the worst love scenes of any type in American film.
It's not hard to see why. I mean,
I believe the only one that beat it out as far as being worse involved Joe Pesci. So
now, you know what's really bad about that? The concept of Joe Pesci and sex together. Remember I was talking about Lethal Weapon 2? They fuck you at the drive-thru.
Okay.
Or even worse, Lethal Weapon 3, they fuck you at the hospital. First they drug you, then they fuck you.
It's...
That's so wrong.
It really is.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
I didn't know what rabbit hole I was opening up there, but yeah, that's what I had heard. Was that this one was voted second?
Car with Mel Gibson and Dan Glover. Oh man.
Yeah.
How do you spell proctological? That's Mel Gibson's line from Lethal Weapon 3, by the way.
I love those films. Even the last one. It wasn't great, but it was still fun. But yeah, that's how bad it was. In the midst of this great movie, everything else about this movie is good and fun, entertaining. Then all of a sudden they're like, we're going to detour it, and then they go away from it. They don't really revisit that much. At the end when they're getting together,
until the very end, you can kind of think they do. But.
Yeah, you kind of, but it didn't. If they didn't have that scene in the middle, you could have imagined even that ending sequence, them just being back together as that, apprentice protege type of relationship, or even just a father-daughter type thing. You could still imagine it being platonic even then if you didn't have that other scene in the middle.
You could, but that scene in there, especially after we go over the rules several times, it's just wrong. Which is really too bad, because as you said, there's really nothing else that's a false note in this movie. I mean, I'm not saying it's flawless, because there's plenty of flaws to pick from if you want. Internal logic is just the start, but we don't expect internal logic. We can go past that. We watched Diamonds Are Forever and came out the other side. And Connery carries the movie so well. I mean, you don't question he's a master art thief. You don't question that he understands all the history of this art, that he owns a castle, and that he's just, as he can decide he's going to join the biggest heist on the face of the earth with barely 24 hours notice. You can understand it. You can believe it, because Connery is Connery, and he's got that Bondinessocity to make you think that he can do anything he wants and be a master spy at it. And he's also then throwing in that Pink Panther quality of the character that's kind of fun and gives it a different type of humor.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He definitely pulls it off. He's the one who carries the movie for the most part. Catherine Zeta-Jones does a fantastic job as well, but I don't think her character works as well with anybody else playing that part. I think Connery really... I think the combination is what really sold it.
Yeah, it's definitely the pair together, because the chemistry, except in the weird incestuous crap, is very, very good, and just a very fun film, and wipes away the image of the one we talked about before this rather nicely. And this is the movie that, if I'm going to pick a favorite out of these four, ties with Hunt for Red October for me. And I enjoy them in different ways.
Right.
And I also think you have Connery's two best performances out of the movies we talked about in these films.
Yes.
And again, I enjoy them in different ways. This one, he's a little lighter, more free, but he's still got that same Bondinessocity gravitas in both cases.
Yeah, he just trades in his spy shoes for his thief shoes, but he's still got that same kind of suave, slick, debonair, but knows what he's doing. All that Bondinessocity is just focused on a little bit different career path. That's all.
Yeah. And so what you end up with is a great film that I do highly recommend.
Yes. Especially
for people who want to feel a little bit nostalgic for the Y2K bug, or who even have no idea what it was and just want to have fun with it anyway. It's a fun caper, and that's really what it boils down to, is a caper. So I recommend Entrapment. Any other words on the movie that you've got?
No, I agree. Like I said, this one was one of my favorites as well. I wouldn't say it ties with Hunt for Red October for me, but it's definitely up there. Just a good movie all around. A solid, fun movie, good caper, good plot, well acted all the way around, and a fun movie. So definitely recommended. So out of the four, I recommend watching 3 of them.
Yeah, I would agree. I would recommend Entrapment, Hunt for Red October, and The Rock. And I would not recommend The Avengers, even if you have Mad Dog 2020 with you.
Or some Boone's Farm, maybe?
Oh, no, Mad Dog. Because Boone's Farm, you stop smelling it at about 10 feet. Mad Dog, that carries about 50. And I've actually experimented with this.
All right.
I'll just say that much. In fact, for those who are familiar with my site, cinemaontherocks.com, you know that I do pair cheese and alcohol with any movies that I review. Amazingly enough, none, as of the date we're recording this, none of the 4 movies we've talked about have been reviewed yet. They will be within a month. The November Man, however, is reviewed, spoiler-free, so go ahead and have a look if you'd like. When I do the review for The Avengers, spoiler alert, it will be paired with Mad Dog 2020.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I would like to say to anybody out there listening who has watched any of these movies, or especially if you've watched all of them, we'd definitely love to hear your opinions on all of these. Let us know where you thought we were right, where you thought we were wrong. We can be found very easily. We are on the web at hermajestiespod.com. We're on facebook.com/hermajestiespod. We're on Twitter at hermajestiespod. And you can even email me directly. I'm Eric at hermajestiespod.com, oddly enough. And as Ziggy said, you can get him on his website at cinemaontherocks.com. Where can they find you directly on the social media websites?
In Twitterverse, you can find me at CinemaOTR, just like you can find Eric at Eric J. Dewey. And you can also email me directly at Ziggy at cinemaontherocks.com. Now, one more thing. I mentioned earlier that Sean Connery ended up deciding he was going to retire, and he did after a very, very bad experience filming. And this is one where he didn't like filming the entire time. In fact, he said one of the reasons that he wanted to quit acting is because this film made him feel like committing murder. He hated the director so much. In fact, the director also quit directing after this. Makes you wish the director had quit one film before. And that was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I am one of 6 people who doesn't hate this movie.
7.
That said,
I enjoyed it. I'm not saying it was great, but I did enjoy it. And in fact, I have it queued up to watch at some point, maybe this week.
I admit that my favorite part of the film was Peter Wilson as opposed to Sean Connery. But Connery does a good job, even though you can tell he's kind of phoning it in, but compared to his performance in The Avengers, it looks like he is on the top of his game. So after that, all he's done is some voiceover work, including in the From Russia with Love video game, which we may get to eventually. I don't know if we will, to be honest, just because of its platform availability. But and I think those 5 roles specifically, if you look at his career after his final time as 007, those are the 5 that come with the most Bondinessocity. Because when he plays Alan Quatermain in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that's still a very Bond-like character. Mm. But I think those 5 encompass it. Because if you look at other movies he did after that, Medicine Man, Finding Forrester, how were these Bond movies? They're not.
No.
So in the case of Connery, he is an actor who did not get pigeonholed, I don't think.
I think you're right. You know, we've talked about a lot of these movies as if he was typecast and these are the only movies that he's ever done, and that's not the case. We picked these because they are somewhat Bondious, but they are not Bond movies, and they were not intended to be. We just kind of associate those with those type of feelings because that's what we do here. But there's been plenty of other movies that he's done that had no Bondinessocity whatsoever, and thus we didn't want to discuss them.
Though we may at some other point. I admit that there are at least 2 other Connery movies that I would love to talk about that have little to no Bondinessocity. In fact, I may have mentioned one several times during this discussion. Hey, I like Zardoz. We will probably get to that at a future date. A long time in coming, probably. Because I want to.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. We'll give it a shot. Maybe we can talk about some pre-Bond actors, or we'll figure something out. I'm not sure when that movie came out in comparison to the Bond films. So
1974. It was between Bond, and I think that would be the theme of that particular show.
Gotcha.
In fact, I already can think of 4 movies to do with it.
All right. Might be coming sooner than you thought. Then who knows? All right. So any other thoughts on the Beyond Bond, Sean Connery?
I think that out of all of the actors who have played 007, now granted he's had the most time,
yeah,
But even so, I think he is the one who has fallen least into the trap of being cast as only James Bond or Bond-like characters, or having to keep going back to that well. Yeah. And of course, I think he's had the most successful career. Though, interestingly enough, when we do talk about between Diamonds Are Forever and Never Say Never Again, those are actually kind of lean years for Connery. He wasn't really getting the kind of respect that he got afterwards, because the movie that really caused the resurgence in his career is another non-Bond role after Never Say Never Again we didn't talk about. Again, from that year of 1986, The Untouchables.
Oh, I love that movie.
The one for which Sean Connery won his Oscar, which, from what I understand, he keeps above the toilet. I'm not kidding.
Gotta have something else to look at when you're in there. So,
hey, above my toilet, I have a Star Trek poster that says "Boldly Go."
All right.
And next to my shower, the poster for Psycho.
Oh, typical. No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, so it took until after he was done with Bond for Connery really to break away. I mean, the movies he did between Diamonds Are Forever and Never Say Never Again weren't really loaded with Bond-type roles either. But in terms of getting the real super respect from Hollywood, that happened starting with The Untouchables, and then going on from there. Amazingly enough, once he got that Oscar, now he's getting parts like Red October.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, and I'm glad it happened, because he deserves it. He may have started out as an unknown Scottish bodybuilder.
I forgot that he was a bodybuilder first. It's funny.
Yeah, Mr. Universe. As when we discussed the original Dr. No, casting him was like casting an unknown Sylvester Stallone. That's basically the functional equivalent.
Hey, wait a minute. I don't think Connery was doing porn flicks before.
Well,
that we know of.
There may be a Scottish stallion out there somewhere.
You never know.
Hopefully not a Shetland pony.
Oh. The imagery. That's not going away anytime soon.
Joe Pesci.
Oh, jeez. And on that note, what are we going to be talking about next time they hear from us?
Next time, we're going to be talking about the last two Ian Fleming James Bond novels that we have not yet discussed. We will be talking about basically the same thing that we did with two of the movies that we were discussing. This will be the Book Abomination episode, where we will be discussing The Spy Who Loved Me and The Man with the Golden Gun. And then, maybe, just maybe, we will have a second opportunity to find our fate, for those who remember the Fun for the Whole Family episode.
Yes, that was a good fun time, and I'm glad that we're going to have another opportunity to find our fate, because that was some fun stuff. We're going to see if you can tie or beat my record of killing Bond in 2 choices. My money's on you lasting longer somehow, but we'll see. Maybe you can manage to find that one choice at the very beginning that kills him right away.
We'll see. One never knows. But that's going to be in our next episode of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. But for now, I'm Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And you have been listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network.
Hey, you're listening to another show on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. For more shows, you can go and check out foureyedradio.com. How they say?